Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Kind of a Bitch. I am going to be discussing a few things today, all around the beautiful balance between professionalism and vulnerability. I want to share a couple of stories in my own experience, my own life of how you can kind of walk that line. But I also want to play with not only some actual scripts that you can use, as well as some signs to look out for if you maybe think that you might be overcompensating on the vulnerable side or on the like over professional stoic side. You know what I'm saying? So we'll talk through all of those things and as well as why this type of balance, this balance between vulnerability and professionalism can indeed attract more opportunity. Let's get into it. We are living in the era of authenticity. And if you are simply listening, you won't see that I've been quote unquoting. I'm using the little quote fingers when I say authenticity. We are told constantly to bring our full selves to work, to be vulnerable, to be real, to be human, but also to keep it together, to be professional and to be really polished. So, my question with all of this is which one is it? And how, if we are trying to walk that line, how do we walk that line between being real and being respected? I want to talk about the messy middle, how we can speak our truth with our clients or our colleagues without oversharing, how we can lead with kindness without being absolutely and totally walked on, and how we can earn more trust and opportunity by showing up with both warmth and competence. This episode, I'm kind of talking to myself here, as I usually am in these episodes, but it's especially for the high achievers, those people who are trying to loosen the grip without losing their edge. What we get wrong about vulnerability at work. I'm sharing a quick story, many stories actually. Welcome to my podcast. It's where I get to yap and you listen. I I had a job years ago when I first transitioned out of performing. I went to work at a nonprofit, and I've shared a little bit about this experience before, but it was my first real office job. Yes, it was my first real office job. Every other job I've had before that was working with kids and obviously performing. I was a company manager, I was a choreographer, I was a vocal captain, I was an actual performer. And then I worked in restaurants, at gyms, all the kinds of things. But being like a 9 to 5 office girly was not something that I was really experienced with. And I remember applying for this job. And this job it had the title of director in front of it. And I remember I was so nervous. I was so concerned with my credentials, with how could I be a quote unquote director if I don't really have that experience. And if you have worked in the nonprofit space, a lot of times the roles that you have, realistically, you are someone who helps to create relationships, helps to direct the success of those relationships. And in my particular case, I also hosted a large event where I invited those people who I had been building relationships with, who I had been collecting donations from, and who I had been, being a person with for the whole year. And I remember when I started, I chose vulnerability over, I don't want to say over professionalism, because I think as a person I tend to be pretty professional, but I chose more vulnerability than I think I should have. And what I mean by that was I was really upfront with how my background made me insecure, with how the skills that I was bringing to the table might not be the set of skills that other candidates had had. And what I mean by that is I think I was really, I think I was calling out my weaknesses that I thought I had before anyone else could. It's like walking into a room and you're like, I know I have a pimple on my head. Don't say anything. Right. Like that's kind of what I was trying to do, I think. And to me, it felt like I was being vulnerable and honest and human with my manager, with my manager's manager, with the other people in the space. And I was good at this job. I was good. I was building relationships. I had a lot of creative ideas. I felt excited about some of the work that we were doing. But the management that we had in place didn't just, they were, how can I say this without whatever, I'm going to say it. We did not have good management in place. And that was obvious because everyone in the office was dropping like flies. Their retention was wildly low because the people who were in place were truthfully awful leaders and used management styles that were I don't want to say harmful, but that were not conducive to a positive work environment. They placed a lot of blame. They never took responsibility. And that is a quick way to lose your people. So I knew after, I think probably in the year, I was there for less than a year, by the way, because as I've mentioned in my other podcasts, if you know it's not working, cut it off and go to your next place. So after having 7 to 9 people leave in our small office within the 10, 11 months that I was there, I knew it was my time to go. And when I went to go give my notice, I was really kind. I didn't give feedback that wasn't asked of me, and I didn't place any blame. I just was very honest that this was not really the place for me, and that I'd like to go off and do something else. However, I said that. Once I was done with the initial leaving, I had a meeting with my manager's boss, who throughout the time that I was there was doing a lot of protecting of my manager, who was not fit to be a manager in the slightest. And so the boss, my manager's boss, did a lot of overcompensating to hide the fact that her friend, who was now a manager, was not a good manager. And so when I went into her office, and she wanted my feedback. She had some questions for me about why I was leaving and what they could do better. And I was hesitant to give that feedback. So I was more vague, and I definitely tried to, I don't know, take more responsibility for the leaving than I should have. And then what she proceeded to do was use everything that I had shared in the beginning about how I felt maybe like I had a lot to learn, and the things that I viewed as my own insecurities that I had shared personally, she used those against me to then say, yeah, you really weren't the right fit. And it turned into a session where she basically berated me about my performance when I was the one that was leaving because of bad management. It was truly wild. And I walked out of there going, wait, did I quit, or did they just, I don't understand. I don't understand. And to this day, my mom is like, you should have written a letter, but we don't need to go there. Anyways, I know now that at the beginning of my time there, I should have looked at my credentials, at my skills, at my personality, and picked out the pieces that were going to make me a strong candidate for this job, that made me good at what I do, because I was good at it. It's just that we didn't have great management. And was I the best? Who knows? I was only there for 10 months or whatever it was. But I remember thinking to myself, dang, I wish I hadn't shared all that. I wish I hadn't shared all that, because I gave them the ammunition that she then used to take me down a peg when I was already leaving. It was wild. Another one that I remember is I have a friend who has a boss, and I remember listening to kind of the drama of this. And this boss, there was a lot of there was an imbalance of expectations. So this boss expected a lot of her people, but then didn't expect the same of herself. And this boss used the opportunity of this friendship of sorts with her employees, with her team, to be more open about what was going on in her life. But the stuff that was going on in her life were things like buying a house and like getting a dog and all of these things that are kind of normal things. But it was meaning that she wasn't showing up to work on time, that she was joining Zoom meetings late, that she was really dropping the ball on her end, but then still using all of these things, all of these pieces of her life to justify why she wasn't able to do her job. But then other people, her team, the people below her, the people who she was leading, were not offered the same grace when it came to sharing what was going on in their life. A great example of how oftentimes there are not things that you should be sharing with the people who you are working with or leading, especially if it means that you're not able to follow through with your side of things. And lastly, my personal opinion about how not to use vulnerability at work is a business owner who I know that uses these social platforms to be very upfront and honest about the success of their business. Now, in some cases, I think this can really work, but in this particular method, the way that this business owner is using it is these posts are turning into a little bit more of a dump about how hard business ownership is, talking about the profits or not profits of the business, sometimes making comments that will guilt viewers about lack of support. And I understand why this business owner is doing it. And I think in some ways that can be successful. But the way that it's happening now, it's an effort to be vulnerable and to be very real. But in my opinion, as somebody who has supported this business, it can come across as victimy, as complaining, and as shaming or guilting of the folks who do support and follow. I think that many professionals confuse vulnerability with emotional dumping. They confuse professionalism with stoicism or people pleasing. It can be really one or the other. People pleasing, as in the client is always right kind of rhetoric. And I think that real vulnerability, if you are going to use this in business, is strategic disclosure. It's not about unloading or dumping, right? It is about choosing honesty and vulnerability when it matters. An author who I love, author and researcher who I love when it comes to the art of communication, and especially the art of communicating with warmth and competence, is Vanessa Van Edwards. And her book, Cues, is life changing, would highly, highly recommend. But one of the things she notes in there is that people decide in seconds if you are warm or competent. And you need both of those things to be considered trustworthy. Okay. Vulnerability without structure means that you are warm but not competent. And then competence without humanity is competent, but there's no warmth. And it's hard to be it's hard for people to turn to you if there's no warmth. So we are aiming for that beautiful blend of both. I'm real, I'm solid, I'm going to be upfront and honest with you, but I've also got you. I can also follow through on what I say I'm going to do. Let's talk about redefining professionalism. I personally feel that professionalism has evolved. It is not all about being buttoned up and super robotic, right? It's about having a really clear communication style. It's about being consistent with your follow through. And it's also about emotional regulation. I I was I was in therapy the other week, and I was talking with my therapist about some of my own stuff, and I had shared that there are many situations where I have opinions about the way that someone should or should be doing things, and I opt not to share. I don't share. And sometimes I'll ask questions, but I don't really share. And she had asked me how I feel about that and whether or not I believed that I was being truly authentic about sharing my opinions or criticism. And what I ended up saying to her is I actually don't feel like I am losing authenticity by not providing criticism or feedback that wouldn't be helpful to the other person. Right? Like I know that when I'm having an emotional reaction to the way that someone else is living their life or doing things or treating people, whatever that looks like, that that is my emotion. That is not theirs. And so for me to sit here and think that it is always my place as somebody who is in the professional world or personal world of this person, for me to think that it is my place to consistently share and be upfront about my opinions, I actually don't think that has anything to do with authenticity. I just think it has to do with the lack of emotional regulation because for whatever reason, there are people out there who struggle. They in the name of I'm just being authentic, I'm just being myself. They come to the table and share with you, well, this is how I feel, so I'm going to tell you. And I sit here and go, well, yeah, that might be how you feel, but that's yours. That's yours. And yeah, I think that there are a lot of managers, there are a lot of people in leadership positions who get there and still have not practiced the art of saying what part of this is mine, what part of this emotional reaction is mine. So I do think that professionalism has an aspect of emotional regulation that we can all really benefit from learning. Professionalism really did, it used to mean like stiff, silent, and detached. But I think in modern leadership, especially when it's in creative, collaborative, or especially service-based work. Hello, service-based work, working with other people, it does require that emotional intelligence. So I think this shift from don't feel, the shift is not from don't feel, like it's not going from lacking feelings to oversharing. It should be from the shift should be going from masking to modeling good behavior, right? It's like modeling clear, calm, honest, accountable behavior. A couple of the old things that we always hear, especially when you think about professionalism, I'm using quotes again, are the ideas of, I'm going to go through a couple of these old phrases that you hear in the workplace, and then what I think maybe they should and could be now. We often hear the never let them see you sweat, never let them see you sweat. But I think that the real way to show good leadership skills and professionalism is to show that you care, but to stay grounded. So it might be okay to say like, "Ooh, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by this," right? But to still stay grounded within that share. Another old school phrase is to keep it strictly business. But like I said earlier, I think the new school way should be share strategically to build trust and relationship. Another old school is emotions have no place at work. And like I said earlier, I think emotional awareness is a leadership skill. Emotional intelligence is a leadership skill. Old school, don't admit weakness. New school, model accountability and growth. Old school, say yes, be agreeable. The client is always right. New school, set boundaries and communicate clearly so that nobody gets upset. A couple of things that you can say. Again, I would just want to model a couple of sentences of scripts that you can use here that are a good mix of warmth and competency. Saying something like, I need a moment before I respond because I care about this conversation, right? Especially if you can feel yourself getting a little activated. I need a moment before I respond. I really care about this conversation. And then another one, if you're talking about that balance between boundaries and clarity, saying something as simple as, that doesn't work for me. Here's what I could use instead. And again, I know if you are like me and you are a people pleaser, that sounds really firm, but I'm telling you, other people are not feeling it the same way we are. I promise you. Okay, now I'm on one. Let's talk about some scripts and phrases for boundaried vulnerability. All right. This is where kind of that kind bitch mentality comes into play. Okay. So if the situation is you have to express some type of disappointment, right? Something, it's going to be a critique or criticism or feedback that feels negative. I would say something like, I care about the quality of what we're doing here. And I also care about our relationship. It's why I need to be honest about what's not working. I love the feeling of being able to say, I love you and I don't want our relationship to be tarnished by this, but I need to share something. Giving a softener before you give potentially negative feedback is a game changer. Number two is when you're not available, when you really don't have the time to be doing something, instead of saying, I'm just so busy or I just don't have the time. I think it's important to, again, pull back, really come back to your values and your what the real root of things is before you speak. So I would say something like, I want to give this the energy it deserves. Can we circle back in 2 days so I'm fully present? Right? This makes me think of the story that I shared earlier about someone who I know who has a manager that is really struggling to hold themselves accountable at the same level that they're holding their team accountable, right? This manager is, instead of using language like this, they are using the opportunity to complain about how hard their situation or their life is when to an audience that really isn't the right audience, right? Your team does not need to know that all of this crazy stuff is happening that was completely optional, like getting a new dog or buying a house. That is completely within your control, right? And so I think that by pulling back on some of that, what we like to believe is vulnerability because it's just the truth of what's happening, it's not the right time or place. So saying something as simple as, listen, I want to give this the energy it deserves. But I'm truthfully, I'm at capacity with some other things right now. Can we circle back in 2 days so I can be fully present with you? And then when you do that, you make sure that you are fully present. Don't be that person. Don't be that person. You know what I'm saying? Number three, when you need to ask for more, like when you need to ask for what you need, saying something as simple as, oh, I'm really excited about this project, but to do my best work, I need more time, or I need an assistant, or I need XYZ, insert the clear ask. Is that workable on your end? You know, I love ending things with an actual question, because when we ask the other person, we want to help other people. So when you find that people ask you for something, or you ask them for something with a clear question mark at the end, people are more excited and ready to respond to you. Even if it's not the perfect response, it will get a better response for you if you end with an actual question. So, a pro tip from Cues, the book that I told you about by Vanessa Van Edwards, she mentions to mirror tone and place in order to build subconscious rapport. Mirror the other person's tone and pace in order to build subconscious rapport. It signals a type of warmth. And then the next one is to use vocal strength and brevity for authority. Use vocal strength. We're talking the way that I'm speaking right now. There's vocal strength and there is brevity for authority. It signals competence. You need both of those things. So if you were on the other side of this recording thinking to yourself, all right, I guess I don't really understand why this is necessary, right? Like, what is this? It's because this type of balance between your professionalism and your vulnerability will attract more opportunity. If you are online, and this is coming from someone who is chronically online, if you are online simply sharing about how hard your life is and how much you're struggling, and there's a constant negative, sad, glass half empty tone to what you are sharing because it's quote unquote vulnerable, people will not view you as professional. It just doesn't work that way. Whereas if you're constantly online saying, look at me, here's all of my success, that's all I post about, people don't know who you are, so they don't care. They might see you as successful or competent, but it is not the type of persona that will pull people towards you, that will magnetize relationships towards you. People want to work with other people, right? People want to work with other people. So vulnerability and professionalism together is a powerful combo, but you do have to know that balance. When you show up as both clear and kind, you become someone who people can trust, but also someone who people can trust to give you real feedback, to give you real opinions about the way that they perceive you or the way that they perceive your work. And as painful as that might be at times, it's what we need. You need the people who you work with, whether it's your clients, your colleagues, your managers, whatever. You need to be able to receive feedback. This is something that fortunately and fortunately, I was thrust into the world of receiving feedback positively because I got my BFA in musical theater. I was in a very high stakes program, a cut system where every year you had to basically vie for your spot. And that meant that our classes were rigorous. And if you got a note from your teacher, you better believe you were not arguing with them. You were not arguing with that. You were learning to take it and say, thank you so much for that note. And to consider that the notes that came for you could be true. Now, as I've moved away from my time in theater school, I've learned that not all those notes were necessary, right? Not all of those notes were things that I needed to completely like absorb into my system. Some of them I would even say I shouldn't have absorbed into my system, but that's on growth. What can you do? So, but that said, being someone who knows how to take feedback and how to accept criticism, even if it means that I do not make it my entire personality, is a highly, highly valuable skill. And the only way that people are going to feel comfortable doing that with you is if you are showing up as both clear and kind and someone that people can trust to not absolutely explode when they give you something. When you're showing up this way, again, both clear and kind, you are going to get more referrals. You're going to get more responsibility for things, and you're going to get more invitations. I honestly, the number of things that I have been invited to, birthday parties, gatherings, things where I just go, man, I'm honored. Clutch my pearls. I am honored. And I really do believe it's because there is people can trust that if I say I'm going to show up, I'm going to, but that I show up with kindness and warmth and excitement and curiosity and questions for people that I might not know. And I think that balance is what keeps people coming back and wanting to send their friends and wanting to build more relationships with me because they know that I'm here. They know that I'm here, full stop. And then lastly, showing up with that clear, kind confidence, as well as authenticity and vulnerability to an extent. It means that I'm attracting more aligned clients and collaborators who will value the same things that I value, who will have mutual respect for what I'm doing because we are showing up in similar ways. People do not hire perfection. Okay. People do not hire perfection. They hire someone that they feel safe with, that they feel that they can be themselves with, and who they feel is someone that can handle the hard stuff without making it super weird. That is I don't know, kind of a special skill that I also think many artists, people who have an art background are especially gifted with, is sitting with people in the stuff that can be uncomfortable, not needing to fix, not needing to disappear. You know those people that as soon as something weird or funky happens, they just shut down and they disappear into the ether. Being able to be someone who can handle hard stuff without making it weird is huge. And I think if we are comfortable with our own vulnerability, we are often able to handle and to sit with other people's vulnerability, even if we've crossed over the line of being vulnerable and professional. A couple more notes from Vanessa Van Edwards. Again, her book Cues, and I think she has another one coming out too that I would also recommend, but I have not read it. She notes that warmth cues can make people lean in. So warmth cues are things like smiling, nodding, open body language, the theater stuff. But then competence cues will make people feel held. It'll make people want to listen. And that is posture, voice control, and certainty in your speech. Now, again, I am not saying that everything needs to be perfect. You hear me throughout this podcast saying ums and uhs and taking pauses. That is all natural human speak. That is human. If we didn't have any of those things, you would probably be considered more like a robot and less like a human. So don't get too caught up in the certainty of speech. The certainty of speech is simply a conviction about what you're saying, a confidence in what you're saying. So using both of these things, whether you are on a Zoom, on a podcast like I am right now, on a client call, or on a stage, is what is going to give you that perfect balance of people wanting to lean in and listen, but also making people feel held and taken care of. What about when it goes too far? When it goes too far in either direction. So let's talk about a couple of the signs of over vulnerability or over professionalism. These are a few things that I've noted down. You're apologizing for existing. Now, I have noted this in other areas of my life. I'm a people pleaser. So my over vulnerability is that I often tend to move towards, kind of like a palms up, please, sir, may I have some more? Like this kind of sad, this I make myself smaller, right? So you start to apologize for existing. Oh, sorry, I just had a question. Like, oh, I don't want to be a bother, but could you, right? Once you start noticing that over vulnerability, pull it back, boo boo. Number two is you're starting to sugarcoat issues instead of addressing them, finding ways of beating around the bush so that because you were so afraid of how someone will receive something, you are not responsible for somebody else's feelings, especially if you are in a position of leadership, even if you're not. But being so concerned with someone else's feelings that you can't even communicate what is needed from them clearly is only going to reflect badly on you. So if you find yourself sugarcoating issues instead of just saying, listen, I know this is going to be a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation, but I need to share a little bit of the feedback we got from client A. right? Having ways to do that, I think is we're moving too close to that vulnerability situation. Another one, you are emotionally rescuing other adults from discomfort. I'm saying that to myself. You are emotionally rescuing other adults from discomfort. And some of that is truly just an inability to be honest, because we are so concerned with the way that other people will feel. Again, I just said this. You are not responsible for other people's feelings. Now, you can definitely soften how someone can respond, and delivery is wildly important. Delivery and how you deliver news that might make them uncomfortable. That is how you build a reputation for being a kind, loving professional. But again, you are not responsible for someone else's feelings, especially if you are in a workplace situation. And then lastly, you're wearing a perfect mask. You're wearing the perfect mask and you are burning out behind the scenes. That is too far in the direction of professionalism. You're not letting people see what's really going on. You're not being honest about where you're at mentally or emotionally. And again, you do not need to give somebody the entire transcript of your latest therapy session, but you do need to find opportunities to be able to say, listen, I realize that I've been overcompensating to keep this running smoothly. And to be completely honest, while I know this is uncomfortable to say, it's not sustainable for me. Can we realign some of the expectations, or can I offload some of these tasks onto someone who can support me in this? Finding ways to do this where you can be honest about where you're at, but also be competent, professional, authoritative, and still maintain that warmth. That is what will get you far. So, this new standard of communication, this recap of kind of this beautiful balance work that we really should all be striving for. You can be real, vulnerable, and respected. You can set boundaries but still be warm. You can set boundaries and be kind. I think that is something that, again, all of us get so, especially if you're a people pleaser, we get so caught up in this fear of setting a boundary and then having someone be hurt or disappointed or angry. And I think that there is a difference in how we set those boundaries, because again, if we are not protecting ourselves, if we are not setting that expectation up front, it actually does become a bigger issue later. It's more uncomfortable for everybody involved. So trade a little pinch, a teeny pinch at the beginning of everything. And that way you don't have to deal with an enormous emergency later. And then lastly, you can be honest and generous. You can be honest about what you can and can't give, but you can still be generous with what you can give. You can still overgive in many ways, even if it's within the boundaries and within the guidelines of what you know you can give. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that's worded exactly correctly, but I trust that you're following me on this. So, last thoughts on this. The people who are thriving in today's workplace and in business and in life, personally, relationships wise, all that jazz, they are the ones who have learned to blend humanity with clarity. So I want you to ask yourself this week. I know I definitely will be. If you listened to my podcast last week where I was really struggling, I'm in a little bit of a boundaries backslide. So as you know, I'm always talking to myself as I record these. We're going to ask ourselves this week, where am I holding back my truth in the name of being polite? Or you can even say, like, where am I focused on being super duper professional that I've become cold or maybe even forgettable, right? I think that is something too. When people have on that perfect mask, perfect is boring. People want to know who you are and where you're coming from, but make sure that you're not going too far and now making your emotional baggage somebody else's responsibility. So, on that last note, I would love if you share this with someone who also needs some permission, to be both strong and soft, or if you listen to the podcast from a couple weeks ago, strong and savage. And of course, if this helped, if there is something in here that resonated, I would love if you sent a message or a DM my way. Thank you, wherever and whenever you are listening, and I will see you next time. Bye.